Welcome to the Chilliwack.tech meetup. We're all about connecting, educating, and helping entrepreneurs. So thank you so much for coming and attending and supporting this. And thanks also to our sponsors for helping us put these monthly events on. We've got the Chilliwack Economic Partners, the Chilliwack Innovation Network, and the University of the Fraser Valley. And thanks to our partners for doing the heavy lifting, Cowork Chilliwack, Currency Marketing, and Wisebox. So I'm pleased to introduce to you our special guests this evening. Please give a warm Chilliwack.tech meetup welcome to Joseph Willmott.
Thank you.
He is the president of HS GovTech.
GovTech.
Right.
I even have difficulty with that right now because we just changed.
Yes. So one of the things I'll be referencing throughout this is Joe. He's told me Joe's okay. I was calling him Sir, but now Joseph, but now I'm okay with Joe, right? So throughout the evening, I'm going to reference Joe's blog, Build a Cash Cow, which from what I understand is building its way to a book. So there's lots of great advice from entrepreneurship in the trenches. So there's some lessons to be learned that I'll sprinkle in. So let's start in Yorkshire, England.
Well, this is where the Willmott family lived for many centuries, and that's Yorkshire, and they immigrated to, we're all immigrants, except the First Nations, but see, we immigrated to Canada, or in the United States first, in 1796. His name was John Willmott, and he got there with his wife and two sons. When they were in Boston, they realized that, the British immigrant was not well received. It was like later the Italians and on and on. And they were destined to go down to South Carolina. So he said, we don't really like it here. And they heard about land opportunities in British North America. So they made their way up through the Hudson River, Lake Champlain, and ended up in York. And you see a picture there with the CN Tower. Now, it didn't look like that in the late 1790s. But anyways, he bought a farm and supplied beef and vegetables for the British garrison, which was a mile west, and the town of York was a mile east. So the reason you see the CN Tower, that is the approximate location of his farm. So then, and his family grew to 5 kids, and they were looking to expand. The farm that they had was only 5 acres, so they wanted to expand. And there was land opening up in Halton County. And that is where Oakville is, 30 miles east of Toronto right now. And so they homesteaded up there in 1825. So they had a section of land to clear. And they built this house in 1830. The house is still standing. That was taken a year ago. And it's been preserved as a historic site, but the town of Milton that bought it doesn't really know what to do with it. So there it sits, boarded up. So I hope they turn it into a museum or bed and breakfast or something. Then, from there, I moved west after high school.
So you're making my job way too easy. You're just going to tell your entire life story. I'm going to cut in. But what I'm curious about is you mentioned your father was very big innovator in the agricultural space.
Yes.
Can you tell me about that?
Yes. The picture you see there is when he was inducted into the Canadian Agricultural Hall of Fame in 2017. He was very instrumental in the beef industry in terms of technology and with respect to artificial insemination rules and what they called EPDs, which was the performance measuring and testing that was standardized, and also was one of the founding directors of the Agribition Livestock Show, which is one of the world's largest, and also he was one of the founders of Farm Progress Show, which is one of the largest dryland farming shows in the world. So
you worked on the farm growing up?
I did.
You did?
I did. And that was something I wanted to be when I grew up. Mm-hmm. I had a lot of respect for my father. He was I guess a major player in the purebred cattle industry, and so that was the direction I wanted to go.
So when you graduated, you got into the beef cattle business.
Exactly. And so one of the biggest mistakes I made was not going to university, but lots of people said, well, you did all right because not going, but it made things a lot easier.
So is that you on the right with the trademark
That is me
mustache?
in 1976. And I had champion female at the Royal Winter Fair in Toronto. And so I was well on my way to becoming a cattle breeder, and we did have a champion bull at the Denver Livestock Show, and I sold him for $50,000.
In 1976.
No, not in 1970, 1980.
But that's still considerably $50,000 in 1980 is a lot of money.
Yeah.
So were you essentially self-employed at that point, or how did that work?
I was, but I did other things. We had a trucking business, and I got into. I could always write. That was one of the things I was born with. I could write. So we had a couple of livestock publications, and in 1980, then I decided that. Well, we lost the land. I didn't own any land, and we lost the land, and that I had run my cattle on. And because we were very popular, I had a dispersal sale, which set records for the breed. So I had an interesting problem in 1980. I had a huge tax problem. So what I did was, did a smart thing, bought a cattle feeding operation with a couple of other guys. Well, interest rates went sky high, barley prices went straight up, and fat cattle prices went straight down. And I got rid of my tax problem. But that changed my whole trajectory of the career, and then moved to the next step.
Yeah, so then you were recruited essentially to work as an advisor in the Saskatchewan legislature.
Murray McAlpine, who is the president of the Saskatchewan Stockgrowers Association, approached me and asked if I would maybe take over the organization. It was the representative organization. They called it Commodity Group. And they had farm stores and this kind of stuff. They were really not concentrating on public policy. And they were also located out in Maple Creek, Saskatchewan. So long story short, we moved the office into Regina, but we had a problem. We didn't have any money. We didn't really represent anybody except a few large ranchers. So that was the first time I understood that you had to generate a value proposition. So we said, well, how do you get political cachet for the government? Well, we need members. With members, we get money. So I came up with an innovative program, and we partnered up with a number of pharmaceutical companies and other companies that supplied stuff to the livestock industry. And we had this cattlemen's field days, or nights, I should say, all across Saskatchewan over 2 years, where we would invite everybody on, January, February, with not much to do except curl, but we would provide a free dinner, talk about the wonderful way of Saskatchewan stock growers and what we could do to better their lot. And we sold memberships. And if you bought a $400 or $500 lifetime membership, you got about $1,500 worth of stuff. So that was an easy sell. And we moved our membership tenfold to about 8,500 members, and had a lot of money in the bank. And we got political crowd. In fact, the organization's still living off the interest that we built in 1982 and 3.
So I sense a theme here. You landed in Boston, your family, and then they sought colder winters in Ontario, and then sought even colder winters in Saskatchewan. And then you made your way a little bit further west for even colder winters in Calgary. So tell me about your move and what brought you to Calgary.
Well, with the Saskatchewan stock growers, also became fairly influential in Saskatchewan politics, which played a role later on. And I became an advisor to the Minister of Agriculture, and but the stock growers didn't pay very well. And so I thought I needed to do something different. At the same time, a gentleman by the name of Cy Hayes, who represented a family based out of Dodge City, Kansas, they had a manufacturing concern located in Nanton, Alberta, which they supplied the United Federated Co-op. and they lost the contract due to mismanagement largely. And he wanted to know if I would sit there and produce a marketing campaign because of our success and my knowledge of the livestock industry. So I took on the job.
That was the WW
Livestock Systems.
Okay.
So they were doing about just under $1 million in revenue, and their U.S. company was doing about $3 million. Well, we put in a program largely based on the what we call Cattlemen's Field Days. What I would do is I would take handling systems out to various co-ops like PB Mart and those kind of stores, and then they would put on a special and bring people in. They would have a beef on a bun and that kind of stuff, and the local vet would do a demonstration, and they would put specials on during the store. And these turned out to be really good. And so stores didn't really want to stock that heavy equipment because it didn't have, the margins weren't all that great, and it took up a lot of room. But we would have these field days, and we would sell $50,000 worth of equipment that day, and this is in the 80s. But they would also sell $50,000 or $60,000 worth of other stuff. So it just became a hell of a marketing plan. So what we decided to do is we hired a bunch of kids out of university, and they had a cowboy hat on, and they didn't have to know anything about cows because the store didn't have a cow in the place. We were trying to sell business opportunities, right? So long story short, in about a year, we'd moved revenue from just under $1 million to $3 million, which is the same as a U.S. company. Well, they took notice, and so then I was recruited to do the same program over the U.S. So in 2.5 years, we moved that company to about $15 million in total revenue. And
so let's stop there for a sec. At this point, you're mid-20s, 30-ish,
yeah,
I bet?
Yeah.
Like, you're talking like a seasoned business pro. You mentioned you would have liked to go to university but didn't. Where did this all come from? Was it kind of innate, or was it from your father and your family business? Or
I guess what I always understood is that you got a problem, you got to solve it. And I didn't have any education, so you figure out ways and means of solving problems. Mm-hmm. And in order, how do you sell this stuff?
It sounds like you had an inordinate amount of confidence, like you were just faking it until you make it and tricking everybody around you. Or
well, I used to go and go to the United States when I was in the cattle business, and buy $100,000 worth of cattle, write a check in the U.S., run home, and get the cattle home and sell them before the check cashed 12 days later. I mean, I would never do stuff like this, because the U.S. exchange, and that's how I.
Wow.
I guess a lot of people say I have a lot of balls, but
yeah,
I would never do that kind of stuff now.
No, it's impressive. I'm just sort of piecing it together and want to pause and just mention that you're not even 30 by this point, and you're building a business to multi-million-dollar revenue and impressing the U.S. concern, and so they tried to move you down south, didn't they?
Well, the business was doing really well, and the Webster family that owned WW, they were heavily invested in the oil industry in Texas, and of course it went down in 1986, and they lost a lot of money. So the only real asset they had was this business, and the banks took it, and so I tried to buy it, and so we had a pretty good deal going. We used McDermott St. Lawrence out of Calgary to do a public offering to buy the business. So everything was going really, really well. And I had put together at least half the raise for McDermott St. Lawrence. And then, I don't know if people that are old enough to understand what happened in 1987 in October. Stock market crashed. And it really killed the small cap business. And so McDermott St. Lawrence just said, look, we can't do the deal. We can't make the commitment. Nobody's going to. So I tried to do a few things, but the receiver needed to sell the business in order to sell the family debts. And so I lost out. But the company that did buy the business wanted me to go down to Dodge City, Kansas. And I had broken up with my first wife and had 3 kids. And Dodge City, Kansas is not the greatest place in the world. Some people say, well, if God was going to give Earth an eminence, that's where he would stick it.
Okay, let's just put an asterisk on that. You glazed over that. You had 3 kids. You were married during this time.
Yeah, when I was divorced.
Obviously, entrepreneurship is all-consuming, and I imagine that took its toll. How was that time, like growing family and so forth? Was it?
I was shocked.
Okay.
She announced that she didn't want to be married anymore, and I was... And I got thinking, well, how stupid could I be? How come I didn't see this coming?
Fair enough. Fair enough.
And one of my blogs, I talk about that.
Yes, we'll get to that. So then you turned down that opportunity.
I turned down that opportunity. I was helping family friends with their beauty wholesale business because she had gotten terminal cancer, and I built it back up and sold the business for them. They wanted me to take it over. I said, yeah, no. Beautiful women and gay men. I have nothing, and my son's gay, so I'm certainly on that, but it's a strange business. So anyways, I was at a barbecue and met up with one of the ADMs that was with the Minister of Agriculture, Associate Deputy Minister in ADM.
In agriculture in Saskatchewan?
When I was with the Minister of Agriculture.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. And he said, so we got visiting, and he said, what are you doing these days? And I explained to him, I said, kind of in between gigs. Mm-hmm. And he said, would you think about coming back to Saskatchewan? I said, sure. So the reason was that he was now the Deputy Minister of Western Economic Diversification. And they had initiated a program called Innovations. The whole idea was to find technology, new product opportunities to expand and diversify Western Canadian manufacturing. And it wasn't going well, as most of the Western economic diversification programs was. And he said, you're a great ideas guy. Would you consider taking this on? And it was a program that was sponsored and worked in conjunction with the Prairie Implement Manufacturers Association. So I did that. I moved back to Regina. And it was a godsend. It was
so, like, as a scrappy entrepreneur that cut checks and ran back to make sure did you find that diving into government work was bureaucratic and like quicksand you felt in, or did you have some mobility?
I was fortunate enough to know that Doug Maley, who was the deputy minister, had a lot of faith in me, and he pretty well let me do what I wanted, which is great, and that caught me as we tried to replicate it in the future.
Got it.
And so we set it up. I got rid of the engineers. We brought in consultants. And I really leaned heavily in the federal government, the Department of Industry, Science, and Technology. And there was a man by the name of Brian Kelly who was really enthralled with what I was doing. And he hooked me up with all kinds of stuff the government was working on. And long story short, we commercialized about 110 projects. And everybody said, well, that's amazing success. This is over a 3.5-year period. But we looked at 5,000. So,
and I believe one of them was this Velmar air seeder.
The Velmar air seeder was probably one of our biggest deals. Jim Halford had been playing around with this air seeder. Now, just to give you a little backstory on air seeders. Seeding until the 70s was pretty well done by discs. You turn the soil and put seed in. And soil conservation, I should say, was becoming in vogue. And so what a company called Flexicoil, which is the biggest cultivator manufacturer in North America, located in Saskatoon, developed a seeding system using pneumatics and putting seed drills right underneath the cultivator shovels so you didn't turn the dirt over and you would go back in on summer, fall, or stubble and seed right into it. Jim Halford was a agriculture engineer, came up with a better idea as the same pneumatics, but he had a banding knife that would put the seed, it would roll the seed over and kind of crumble up the dirt, put a perfect seed bed, and then side band the fertilizer. So long story short, the yields were up 35 to 40%. Not yields, but germination, which is huge. And so anyways, I went to Flexicoil with this idea, and they kind of turned me down. But I met up with a guy, the president of West.
Did they see it as a threat to their kind of established tech?
Yeah, he was quite upfront about it. He said, look, it may be a good idea, but I render everything I've been building for the last 10 years obsolete. So, thanks, but no thanks. But I met up with a gentleman who was the president of West Steel, and they were a big bin manufacturer, grain bin manufacturers and buildings and stuff like that. And they were looking at getting into something different. And I convinced them to take a look at this thing. And long story short, they got behind it. And the Valmar air seeder is the world's best-selling air seeder.
Wow.
And I don't know how many tens of millions, hundreds of millions do now, but it is sold universally.
So after a return to Saskatchewan, you finally headed fully west to the Pacific Ocean,
Yep.
the promised land of White Rock. What brought you out this way?
Well, this innovations project was very successful, but however, it was sponsored by Western Economic Diversification. And the Liberal government came into power in 1993 and vowed to dismantle it. And unfortunately, there was a lot of bad stuff going on with Western Economic Diversification, but this is one of the good projects. So anyways, UBC wanted me to come out and do the same thing for the university technology, and BCIT kind of got involved. But I learned very quickly that university bureaucracy, there was no way I could do what I did in innovations to make it work. And it was going to fail. So I just said...
Got it.
And we started a consulting business.
Okay, so out of that came the consulting business.
Yeah.
And you partnered with, I think, a lawyer and an accountant?
That's right,
And
yes.
you as the idea guy and the consultant, basically.
Well, they would give me all the trouble.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair
If
enough.
you're in trouble, what was that? The guy that was the Trump's guy called Roger Stone. I mean,
Got it.
Called Joe Willmott because he.
Let's not go there.
No, I was ethical.
Fair enough. So this brings us to one of the first lessons, and you wrote an article on your blog about this, learning when to hold 'em and when to fold 'em, which brings us to this story, which is the Hammerlock coupler standard.
Yeah.
So tell me about that story.
That's a big one that got away. Arthur Hammerl was a old rancher in Calgary who came to us when I was with the Innovations Project with this idea of an automatic coupler for tractors. You can put it on there and you can back up and load the cultivator and you wouldn't have to try to measure it.
So it's like an upside-down trailer hitch almost, right?
Yeah. I knew that was never going to work because one of our big projects was a power pin, which is universally sold now. So, but anyways, he had mentioned he talked to somebody, or somebody had he had talked to somebody who had was interested in it, but he was on Cape Canaveral, and so I phoned the guy up, and I talked to him. I said, "Look, Arthur suggests I talk to you." And he said, "Yeah, I saw his big thing on, and I don't know how he saw it somewhere." Anyways, he said, "That might work for utility trailers and boat trailers." And I said, "You might be right." So anyways, with his help, we went and built a scaled-down model that could fit in the square tubing of the receptacle of a pickup truck. And then we bolted the ball onto the trailer. He cut the ball hitch off. And one thing I learned is you got to have unique and significant differentiation to be successful in products. So I thought, well, I need to know this. I don't know how you would ever, it's such a new concept, how do you ever come up with an idea and do focus groups or anything? So I got an idea, and I said, Jack, is there a big, the guy's name is Jack Moore, and I said, Jack, is there a place we can kind of show this? He said, yeah, there's a Space Coast Tarpon tournament, the biggest fishing tournament in the area. I said, I'll bring it down. So anyways, brought down, we put it on his truck, and we put his ball hitch on his trailer. And I put a sign up and says, how many people does it take to load your boat? And all we did is back up, and it created, we had people 30 deep looking at this thing, wanting to know where they could get one. And I went, well, Joe, how much is this? And I had some experience in manufacturing, obviously. I said, $300, which I thought was outrageous. Yeah, we'll get, I want to order on this. It was not even built yet. Well, we don't even know if we're going to sell it. So with that, I realized we had a hit. So we moved forward, and the product you see there was a cast iron casting, and then Jack Moore knew somebody who knew Glenn Lau, who was the ultimate in outdoor marketing. I don't know if you remember the Budweiser frogs. That was one of his deals. He did work for all the major like GM and stuff, and so he was had his studios in Universal Studio in Orlando. But anyways, he saw the things. Said, I want to get involved. So we hired him, and he got Hank Parker, and Hank Parker had the #1 rated fishing show. And several, like 10 million on Saturday morning watched this thing. So he became our spokesman. So we did TV ads, all kinds of stuff. And we got.
I remember those would knock off my cartoons on Saturday morning. It got into the fishing show. So.
Yeah. So there's a real funny story about that one too. But anyways, I'll stay on topic. So anyways, we had $10 million worth of advance orders from Bass Pro and Cabela's. Then Glenn phones me up and says, "We're not going to deliver this year." I was stunned. He said, "Well, I saw plans that you guys were working on a universal ball cap adapter, which you can see there. You could convert any standard trailer." And I said, "Don't go there, Glenn, because we have tried to get physical testing, and it's failed because we're trying to stick something into somebody else's product, which is all different." He said, "Well, no, there's a way to do it." He arbitrarily canceled the order, so I went and fired him. And so I fired God, and so God went to our board and told them that I didn't know what I was doing, and the board said, "Well, Joe, you got to hire him again." I said, "No way, I quit." Dumb, because I was completely right, and they could not get it to pass DOT standards. And the company ran out of money, and Glenn Lau was owed money, so he gathered up all the inventory that was there. And I did another stupid thing, they asked me to come back, and I did, and I sued them. So $500,000 later, we still were nowhere. And these things sold over the next few years through infomercial. And
as seen on TV.
As seen on TV.
Wow.
Because we had all this footage and stuff, and I just didn't have the stomach nor the resources anymore to finance the lawsuit.
And so that brings us to the next
but the other thing is,
let's go back.
So when to fold them or when to hold them, I should have held them with Hammerlock. We got into a deal with our finance company. We took it public early during the dot-com boom. And we were doing fine as far as the money raising for the finance company. Stock price went in the toilet because everything went in the toilet. And the board, in their infinite wisdom, wanted to bring on a guy from Ogden Brown to do mergers and acquisitions, but I thought it was a crazy idea, and I flatly resigned, and that was the right move. Because they got into all kinds of trouble after that.
Got it. So from there, you thought, okay, let's go 180 degrees and get involved in the ownership of a sports team.
Yep. Never get involved in sports teams.
So it was the Vancouver Ravens lacrosse.
Yes.
Tell us about this adventure.
A friend of mine, Tom Mayonek, brought the franchise of NLL franchise to Vancouver. He used to be was a former marketing director for the Grizzlies. And he decided that the franchise would work because BC is a hotbed of lacrosse. And he got David Stadnick, who is a wealthy entrepreneur, a technologist, to finance it. Well, with the stock market crash of 2000, Stadnick lost most of his money. And so Tom brought in another investor, Paul Reinhardt, an ex-NHL hockey player. And that relationship wasn't real good. I knew Tom, and that time they were fighting, and they didn't have, and nobody would do anything to raise money, and the team was hemorrhaging money because they were playing at GM Place at the time, and it really was not a good deal. So, anyways, I got involved, raised some money, got them started, and we decided to sell the team. because there was just really no way to make it profitable under the circumstances. So the league found a buyer who turned out to be a fraud, and we got the team back just ahead of the season. Well, there's no way we're going to go back to GM Place and lose another $500,000 on the arena itself. So we made a deal with the Coliseum, and it was looking pretty good. And actually, we could get in there and had 16,000 or 15,000 seats, and we were drawing about 10,000 in the games. So. But the Pacific Exhibition neglected to talk to Ron Toigo, who was the tenant there with the Giants, and he had put almost $1 million in improvements into the arena. So all of a sudden, he found out that they were going to allow the Ravens to come into the arena. Well, he was not impressed. And so he had a clause in his contract he could veto any new properties coming in. So we were right up the season. We lost our arena, so we had to fold the team, which is unfortunate. But yeah.
So you got involved in another team.
Well,
this is
you
the
see, my
Surrey
son is
Stickman.
second from the back row, and so, anyways, the junior A Surrey Stickman they were looking for somebody to kind of take over the team, and so I bought the franchise and ran it for 10 years, and so that was kind of fun. It was very competitive. We had. I think about a dozen players make it pro. We graduated about a dozen players make it pro, and we had probably 15 players that got full-run scholarships in the U.S. for field lacrosse. So
wow.
I felt good about that, and that was certainly wasn't a moneymaker, but it was something I thoroughly enjoyed, and we helped a lot of kids.
And so while you were doing this, you were also doing your consulting, essentially, and that somehow brought you to Chilliwack, where you currently live. This is the first hole at the Falls with Joe's view, and I asked him, do you play golf? And he said, no, but I have a nice view. So, but this is, in and around here is when you got involved with Health Space.
Yeah, Health Space. I was we put on a business seminar, and I had been doing speaking tour on Build a Cash Cow, and Howard Olson, who is an internationally renowned sales trainer and speaker, wanted me to come in, and we were going to do a deal at the Vancouver club. So anyways, there was somebody and it was well attended, several hundred people there, but one of the people in the audience talked to one of the founders at Health Space and said, I was at this seminar, and this guy, Joe Willmott, seems to know what he's talking about, maybe give him a call. So called me out of the blue and gave me a basic understanding of what they were doing. So we went out to Hope, and that's the old radio station above the CIBC on Wallace. So I go in there, and really strange. There's about 20 people in there, and they're all wearing lumberjack shirts and stuff. There's phone lines everywhere. They had these computers, and I was utterly blown away with the sophistication of the system. They had a couple of clients, but they just secured the state of Virginia.
And what was the basic business model? What did they?
The basic business model was providing. They were one of the early pioneers in providing integrated systems for health protection, meaning the inspection, the regulatory enforcement. And what set them apart is that they were able to do this over the internet, utilizing Lotus Notes.
So a health inspector would go in, put everything into a database.
He didn't have to go back to the office. He could look. And so I noticed one thing. So we were kind of get to know you kind of meeting, but I noticed a stack of letters on one of the desks that were from CRA, and it was about that thick. So I said, "What's this?" He said, "Oh, those letters from CRA." So I picked up the top one, opened it up, and it was noticed that they had sent out notices to garnish their clients. Well, which is
game over.
Game over. Stephen Plan, my accountant partner, I called him right away, And he said, well, who's the agent on the letter? And I gave him the agent's name. He says, I know him. We just successfully resolved another matter. And let me give him a call, see if we can do something about this. So he called him. He said, no, I'm sorry, Mr. Plant, but the letters have gone out. But I'll go down and see if they've been actually mailed. And thank God they hadn't been mailed. So, because Stephen said, well, we're on the job. We hadn't signed a contract. We're on the job, and we can get this resolved. He said, with that, I will retract the order. And that's how it started.
That sounds almost like selling cows before you had the money.
So we refinanced them, reorganized it, and in 2007, the two partners were really at loggerheads, and it was a toxic relationship. So one partner asked me if I would step in and be the CEO, and amongst all the other things I was doing, and so I did. And we had a fairly rapid growth from 2007 to 2013.
And so you transitioned what seemed like primarily manufacturing hardware into software. Is business, or was it a learning curve, or how did that go?
Well, I had to understand the technology and what it was used for. But one of our sales guy had a heart attack, and we were booked into a bunch of these conferences. So I stepped in, and I was kind of said, well, I really don't know the software. And I remember one of the gals, probably Anna Marie, I think, said to me, one of our support people, well, you probably know more than the people you're showing. So
that's all that matters, right?
So it was the theater of the mind. But anyways, but we had an innovation. One of the software engineers came to me, and because up to that point they were basically a job shop. So every system was built specifically for the health department. And the old adage is in health protection, if you've seen one health department, you've seen one health department. Because everything evolved in public health locally. There's no standardization at the time. So he came up with an idea called EI Root, where every innovation that we put for every client was in a central platform. So basically, if we got a new client, you like this thing, you like this thing, it became a smorgasbord. And he just turned everything on. And it really reduced the cost.
So this was really an early SaaS model, software as a service.
Yes,
Prior
but we
to
were
that,
client server, yeah.
Got it. So you weren't necessarily installing a server for them. It was all internet-based? Or
all internet-based. So it was a rudimentary SaaS. We were quite advanced on that basis, but it was still Lotus Notes that was designed in the 1980s from IBM. And I felt that in the by 2013, I said, there's a heck of an opportunity here. All the people my age were retiring, and the whole new generation was coming up that were computer savvy. And basically, our competitors and ourselves had old-style technology. What about tablets? And what about smartphones? What about HTML5, which we can go into completely internet-based applications, no software downloads. So I went to our people and I said, "This is where I want to go with the company." No, we're not interested in that. That was a crazy idea. This works. Why change? So I bought the company.
And somewhere along the line, you refreshed the brand and really kind of positioned it more as technology forward.
Yeah. The first thing we did, we bought a company called iGov that had a tablet inspection system. And then that evolved into a whole SaaS application. We finally got it launched at the latter part of 2018, and we had some issues with it initially because it was completely new technology. And then but it really started to take off in 2020, and I was completely right. People were embracing this. This is cool stuff. And everybody else had data technology. And so our sales have gone up like this since we've launched it, and so it's been good.
And when did HealthSpace go public?
When public 2015, I had to. Okay. Yeah, we had to pay off.
So after you acquired it, then
we had to pay the debt because I did all debt financing.
And what stock exchange is it on?
On the CSE.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, there's some issues there. We're going to have to move to a more senior exchange because we've kind of outgrown that. We're not getting the coverage we should be.
And then most recently, with all of this skyrocketing success due in part to the pandemic and people taking it really seriously, you decided to rebrand to HS GovTech, and this has just happened within the last month. Yeah.
Well, we've been talking about this for 3 years. We had expanded well beyond health protection into consumer protection, fire and rescue, and agriculture. And so everybody thought we were a health services company. We're really not. And so we finally rebranded it HS GovTech, which is government technology. Because our technology is advanced, we really want to move into code enforcement. That's building inspections and plumbing inspections, all that kind of stuff. And so that's our next big push.
Have you found it difficult, if your clients are primarily in the U.S., to be a Canadian company, or hasn't it really mattered?
No, it hasn't mattered at all. And I'm somewhat amazed at our success in the United States. And there's another small company in Canada, which we probably 50-50 in the country. But no, we're getting 9 out of every 10 contracts we go after.
And charging U.S. dollars doesn't hurt, I imagine.
Oh, yeah, and 50% of our workforce is Canadian. And paying Canadian healthcare rates, which is a pittance.
So I'm going to transition into some of these blog posts and hit you with a lightning round of headlines. So you say ideas are a dime a dozen. Expand on that.
Yeah, I coined that phrase with innovations. You know, all these people coming in with all these ideas. Don't forget, we looked at 5,000 of them. And some of them were good, but they're really, it comes down to a certain set of criteria that you need to have. And we got pretty good at picking the winners. But there's 3 things. Number 1, it has to offer unique and significant advantage in the eyes of the intended user. Number 2, you really need to know who that is, clearly. The idea is the shoulder market is the primary market. Some people think, well, this product will satisfy a whole broad group of people, but not really. There are some early adopters that you really need to pay attention to, and you need to craft your product features and benefits and your story to those primary people. The other guys come anyways. The third ingredient that you need is a product or a project champion, somebody who's going to push this along. And sometimes it's the entrepreneur. Sometimes it's somebody like at John Deere that pushes the power pin along, or somebody at West Steel that pushes the air sealer along. And if you had those 3 things, the chances of success were about 75%. But you didn't find them very often.
Next one is the answer to business success is 34. What do you mean by that?
Well, it was a play on the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, 42, and so 34. There's three things that a company really needs to pay attention to. And a company only does really 3 things. It generates leads, converts leads to customers, and fulfills. And in order to do that successfully, you need to have a highly innovative product. 1. 2, you have to have clear definition. 3, you have to have the ability to orchestrate the delivery and systemize that process. And 4, you need to be able to duplicate it or scale it.
So that's the 4, and the 3 are the basic things that a business does. Got it.
Yeah, so, if you go and think about your business, these things, if you can condense it down, because a lot of people get lost in the minutiae of their business. They really don't understand, what are we really trying to do? Yeah, I know we need accounting, and we need this, we need sales. But not really. This is when I talked before about being able to solve problems.
Yeah. So the 10, 20, 30 rule in making presentations.
Oh, I learned this the hard way. How many times we would go and make a presentation or a demo, and you walk in, or you're sitting there in the hallway, tick, 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 tick. You're supposed to be there at 1 o'clock. This is like 1:35, and you're still not in. And you get in there and say, well, sorry we're behind, but we're going to have to get up, get on schedule. So you got 20 minutes. Or you go in to a presentation, and Tim says, I hate to do this to you, Joe, but you're on time, good. But I've got a pressing matter to deal with in 15 minutes. So 10 means no more than 10 slides. Your whole deal's got to be 10 slides, and you got to be impactful. The slide has got to, and you got to be able to deliver it in 20 minutes or less, even though you may have it take an hour. In order to not put too much information on a slide, which just buries people, it's got to be 30, no less than 30 points. If you do that, you have a good presentation.
So I'm looking at my notes, and it says I've got 41 slides. I didn't pass that. We're doing it in about 60 minutes, but I am well over 30-point type, so I'm a third of the way there.
Yeah.
No, those are very good points. So why entrepreneurs fail at relationships? You touched on this a little bit, but you opened your heart on your blog, and I'm curious on what you mean by that.
Well, it is, if you're going to pick that lifestyle, if you're going to try to build a business, it takes a certain amount of cachet, confidence. But you'll find very quickly you get consumed into the project if you're going to make it. And what happens then is you start, because of overwork, because of really your hard driving towards a goal, you're going to neglect personal relationships. And the other really big thing is that unless your partner buys into it, an entrepreneur's life is really unstable. Yeah, you got riches, and most people can't deal with that very well. And you might be a nice guy and everything, and I always thought I was a nice guy, but no, it's difficult. If you find somebody who can buy into this thing and becomes a partner in it and shares the opportunities, you have indeed a tremendous asset.
So it sounds like you're there now, though, right?
Yes.
Yes, that's good. All right. The entrepreneur, the consultant, and the technician.
Here are the three types of self-employed people. The entrepreneur we just described, hard driving, he's got a new idea, he's going to invent something, he's going to change the world. And risk taker. Then the other person that's self-employed is the consultant, and those are lawyers and dentists and consultants and those kinds of things. They like to help people. They don't take a lot of risk, and they are predictable in what they want to do. They don't, so they'll set up a practice. And the technician is the hairdresser, the electrician, the carpenter that applies their skills in work. So what they do is they typically don't want to work for somebody. They want to be their own boss, but they want a stable environment, and they have a steady line of customers. And so those are the three different types of...
So you definitely fall into the entrepreneur. You've done some consulting, but definitely the entrepreneur side. I would say myself, personally, I was trained as a graphic designer. I'm a technician, control freak, and it's kind of the worst person to be self-employed to a degree. I remember my father gave me... So
you're a technician.
Yeah. My father gave me a book called The E-Myth, and it talks about this from the very get-go, is the baker hates their job, so they quit their job to own their own bakery, and then soon realize that they can only do the baking in the middle of the night because of the rest of the time they have to run the business.
Right.
And so if you're not the technician, like yourself, somehow landing a software company, you're probably the best leader possible because you can't get in there and fix the code. You've got to hire people to do it.
You're so right. And technicians are difficult leaders because they tend to micromanage. However, I didn't understand that when I looked at the successful tech companies that have survived, they're always headed up by a technician.
True.
And so what we did is we appointed a CEO who was the architect of our software application.
So you've now stepped back. You're the president, but you've hired a CEO to basically be the successor and really take over.
So I'm the old sage that gets people.
So by a show of hands, how many entrepreneurs in the audience? We've got a couple. How many would call themselves a consultant? A technician? So sort of equally there. Colin has got a personality disorder because his hands are going up constantly.
You're hybrid. You're hybrid.
But it is tough, and I like the way that you've defined those roles. So now you have an equation: Q plus A times D equals R.
Yeah, and I would mention this to people, and they would look at me strange. No, but it makes. But again, condensing information into simple, understandable algorithms or statements. You will then focus in on what's really important. You don't get lost in a wide variety of, like I said before, minutia. Q means quality, and I've talked about this before. Quality product, significant differentiation, plus awareness. Awareness to be able to get people involved with the product that in a way that they can understand the qualities of the product. Plus distribution or scale equals revenue. And
correct order, President. You multiply numbers first. So put some brackets in there.
Yeah, brackets around Q plus A.
yeah,
We just identified the technician.
there you go.
I said this to somebody once, and they said, "Oh, that must be the new math." And it is around 1300 AD.
Got it. Yeah, so you take the sum of Q plus A and then multiply that by D, and then turn that into cash.
Yeah.
Simple as that. And finally, are you getting people to do what you want? So talk to me
This
about
is something
this.
I've given a lot of thought over, Tim, over the years, and you can't get anybody to do anything you want, and that seems to escape most people's logic, and that is why that's the greatest sense of frustration for most business owners, is to get people to buy into it. And I've taken a look at how do sports teams function, successful sports teams. Well, successful sports teams have very defined rules. Everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing, and everybody needs to work together and get that done. But their individual play is not as important as the objective of the team, whether it's a Stanley Cup or winning the game. So the team's objective is bigger than they are, and they only participate. And through that, you can create community, and no different than business. If everybody knows what the rules are and what their role is, even if they don't like what they're doing, but if they're part of something bigger than that, then they will want to do, even if I don't like exactly what I'm doing, if I can do the best job I can, I'm going to help the team. People don't really like working for somebody who's gregarious, and they want predictability. They want to know that people have got their back, and I would liken it to an inverted triangle. Okay, when I'm president or when I was CEO, I'm at the bottom, and the triangle goes this way. So everything, I support the next line supports the next line, and the front line people are supported by all of us. And if you take a look at that, I always marvel at the fact that customer-facing people, generally, whether it's in a hotel or even sometimes even our business, are the lowest paid. That doesn't make any sense to me, because that is what the company is. And so, yes, you hire high-priced programmers and that kind of stuff. You have to, because they're highly educated and they create value. But it has to be a team spirit. This is one of the things that we're trying to implement as OKR's objectives and key results. So we can clearly communicate what it is we're trying to do.
Have you found it challenging? I know that your team was all together in Chilliwack, hit the early pandemic, and you've now gone completely remote. I know you have an office here at Cowork Chilliwack and one other one upstairs, but everybody else is remote.
Well, we were forced to, but one of the things we were concerned about, we were growing quite rapidly, and we were really worried about being location-centric to bring in the talent that we needed. Pandemic hit, we had to send everybody home. And so we said, well, I guess we're gonna do an experiment, see if it works. So we decided to go virtual, and we've over 100 people now all over North America. And that is a learning experience. And frankly, I was skeptical that it would really work. We would probably gravitate back to the office. We closed down the Charlotte office as well. And it has worked better than I would have expected.
What are you doing to maintain that culture or build that culture?
One thing you need is constant communication. The other thing that we need to do a better job, I think, is accountability. You know, Peter Drucker back in the 60s talked about the knowledge worker as being, you couldn't regiment them, they're independent. But in doing that, you have to have some guidelines that they need to, yes, they work independent because you cannot systemize, like in a factory worker, knowledge business. But the only way to regulate that is accountability. So they need to make deadlines because a smart knowledge worker, how long does it take to make a decision? You can ruminate and cogitate for days, hours, or you can make a decision that quick. And so you got to foster that type of environment. So quicker decision making, being able to allow people space, and we're talking about a collapsing to a 4-day work week. That doesn't mean that we're nice guys or gals and everybody gets long weekends. My belief is that the work that we do is stretch out 5 days. If we gave them condensed it to 4 days, we get as much, if not more, because they would have that downtime to recuperate. I believe it would be a productivity improvement. So we're talking about that right now.
Awesome. Well, let's hear it for Joseph. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
I was able to get in a word or two in Edgewise and ask a couple questions, but I'm sure that you guys have some questions as well. And Tony's got a mic here. Anybody got a question?
So, of course, hiring that many people in such a short period of time at a time when wages are just really growing quickly and everybody is competing against the big boys for talent, what would be your number one tip you'd like to share with successful hiring?
Well, the fact that we're working from home and we have no intention of bringing you back to the office, that was a big deal because most of our competitors are trying to transition back. The fact that we're a new growing company, we were paying compensatory wages was another. But I'm going to tell you the biggest tip was finding a good HR firm. That was a godsend. We were not hiring at the speed that we felt that we needed to pick up the demand. And so I looked at a number of HR firms that so-called worked in the tech space, and we found a company called Affinity in Vancouver. And they've recruited all over North America for us, and they've been first rate. And that probably was the biggest thing, is to get the people. One thing I will mention, though, not everybody can work from home. And we've had to go through a number of people because they couldn't deal with the isolation or did not have the capability or the communication skills to work remotely. But you find that out fairly quickly.
You mentioned some people can't work from home. Are you finding now that things are opening up, can some of those people go to a co-working space and just be around other people, or do they need that management?
Most people don't want to do that. There's a couple exceptions. There's a group out of our Ohio that we've got an office in Dayton, and it's a similar situation here. And I have one of our senior managers has an office here, and we've picked up hot desks for some of our employees. We have one gentleman who comes here twice a week, and so when he wants to do his concentrated work. So, but generally, people don't want to do that. They're quite happy. And the people who have adjusted, like Bev and Denise, and there are two of them in our company, you couldn't drag them back to an office.
What advice would you have for an entrepreneur that has a good idea and has made a prototype and doesn't know where to go next?
That is a question I've been asked many, many times. Obviously they would land up on our doorstep at Innovations, but that was years ago. Basically, if you got a good idea and you've tried it out and you believe, like I did with the Hammerlock, I went down and showed it to a bunch of people and they went nuts, get a patent. Yeah. And our intellectual property protection, first thing you do. And it's not cheap, but you want to do that. Beware of the invent help type places. They're money grabs. Beware of consultants. What I would do if I was a greenhorn and had an idea, I'd talk to people like myself that have been around the horn a couple of times and aren't interested in taking your money, but give you pointers of what to do. And steer you in the right direction. And that's what I would do. And stay away from the invent help type people and consultants.
So you do know that you need to talk to him now, right? And he said that was okay.
But no, I'm serious. It's paying it forward.
Yep.
In relation to that question, how would you get people to buy into your product?
That is a very complex problem. I'm going to give you a story about Jim Scharf. He's the guy that developed a cellophane thing that's stuck underneath the counter and called Easy Wrap. And it's one of our projects, actually. He's a farmer in Purdue, Saskatchewan. And he had a metal thing that he built in his Quonset over the winter. And obviously that was not going to make it. So we hooked him up with the plastics division at Saskatchewan Research Council. They had a really good plastics lab. And a man by the name of Orville Ohm, which is a wonderful name for a scientist, designed the product. And Jim was proactive. So what we did, once he had a product in, and he started taking it to home shows. He had a few built and taken them to home shows, and was convinced that this thing would sell. So we hooked him up with a manufacturer. We hooked him up with, these are easy places to find, the marketing arms, on television and stuff, and he started that way. And it just started to build and build and build and build. He made millions off that thing. But he did the steps. What did he do? He developed a product, got it built commercially so it could be built for, you didn't have to pay $100 for this thing. He took it to home shows initially. He had things built and took it to home shows, tried to find out what people thought, realized this was really popular, and then got on infomercials and got a manufacturing company to support that.
So it sort of sounds like one of the things that you're saying is, protect your IP, but after that, don't be afraid to go out there and talk about it and show it off.
Yeah, file a patent and then show it to everybody and anybody.
Yeah.
We used to, at Innovations, that was one of the services we provided was a economical patent filing. So these entrepreneurs could at least get something. And unfortunately, that program doesn't exist, but that was a good service that we provided.
And I know for more technical, IRAP is a government.
Yes.
And some of the folks that we know, Dave, who was our speaker last month, has really tapped into some of that government. So there are folks amongst our community.
We got $1 million from SRNED. That's the scientific and educational research grants. And they'll pay a third of your technical development costs. IRAP is another one for early stage development, and particularly if it's involving technology.
Any other questions? Rob's got another one.
Yeah, one of the things that I had some experience with in government is the possessiveness of data, and it can be a real challenge to get government officials past the hurdle of, if I use an online service, where's my data going to live? What legal jurisdiction is it subject to?
Yes.
How do I assert my ownership of it? In that, typically with government, you're very concerned about, the potential for someone else using the data or getting access to the data and what that means for the politicians. It's really huge, and so I'm wondering how you've been able to get over that.
That was a huge barrier. One of the things when we had the EHS platform, the old IBM technology, they had superior security. But when we went to the cloud, when we going in that direction, nobody wanted to do that, and it flipped very quickly, fortunately. But we're SOC 2 compliant. We have audited every year, the system and controls, and that is about $100,000 a year that we have to go through that process. But I'll give you an interesting story. We're the first company to ever publish restaurant inspections to the public. And a forward-thinking health department official in the state of Virginia thought this would be a good idea. Well, the state lawyer said, geez, no, we're not doing this. But he prevailed. And so in 2003, we started publishing restaurant inspections to the public online. Well, this was just completely novel. We were on Dateline, and they would have the TV stations in Virginia would have the Dirty Dozen on Thursday nights and stuff like that. And what they were scared of is restaurants would sue them, and because there was inspectors that thought they were acting on behalf of the restaurants. Well, no, they're not. You're public protection. But how things have changed. In 2003, wow. So we were on national TV in the United States because we published restaurant inspections.
So, question with your technical team now and having a distributed team, and you're more North American based, and it's a bit more of a technical question, do you find that your team now is more async, where it's just people asking and then waiting for someone to come back? Or are you more, all working on the same time, and like you were in an office, do you run it more as a synchronized team? Or
well, we cross 3 time zones, and so everybody works in that relationship. We give people flex. So if you're in the east and you don't like to get up in the morning, you can do the 1 o'clock to 9 o'clock shift, or if you're in the west and are an early bird, we can make that accommodation as well. There's a gentleman in I think Colorado that likes the early shift, so he gets started at 6 o'clock in the morning. And the programmers and that type of thing and configurists on the systems, they're not bound by a clock, and so they will work what is convenient for their schedules.
I think we got it. Well, let's hear it once again for Joe.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Good job, Tim.
Thank you. In addition to this event, we are also resurrected the Creative Third Thursday. So on the third Thursday of the month, you can meet with other creative folks. And there's a lot of crossover between the tech and creatives. I have my foot firmly in both categories, so you're more than welcome. And we've got some interesting conversations coming up as well. And of course, the Chilliwack.tech this is the 4th Tuesday, but it'll be on the 3rd Tuesday. I was not available last week, so watch your calendars, and I've got your emails now that you've signed up for tickets, and then we'll make sure to keep you posted on who our next guest is. We're just working on that now. And so once again, that is the Chilliwack.tech meetup. By all means, still can take a walk to the kitchen, grab another beer or some more pizza, and hang around. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.